Morning, everyone. I'm Barry Fenter, the CEO of Nashua.
Hi, everybody. I'm Megan Pardigadu. I'm the Group FD of EOH.
Ed Kieswetter. I work for a small company in Pretoria.
Emery Brown, CEO of Rand Merchant Bank.
Puti Mahanyele Tabengwa, CEO South African Naspers.
I'm Janine Gertson. I'm either the wind beneath Bronwyn's wings or the thorn in her side.
Morning, everyone. Fatima Newman, CRO, EOH Group.
Morning, thanks for having us. Bronwyn, Ricky Robinson, CEO, LRMG, a smaller company.
Hello, everyone. Mudiwa Gavaza, Business Day and Financial Mail.
He's actually the CEO of the media for the purposes of this engagement.
I missed the name. Sorry, I missed the first name. Mudiwa.
Stephen Van Coller, CEO, EOH.
Morning, Busima Buza, Chairman, Industrial Development Corporation.
Anthony Ball, Chairman of Value Capital Partners.
Good morning, I'm Siti Mbile, the Acting CEO of Brand South Africa.
Morning, David de Villiers, CEO of Alex Forbes.
Commissioner, you are in the spotlight. Why did you come out of retirement, sir?
I haven't worked that out yet, actually. And my family is still fighting with me about that. But, you know, when we went through the terrible period of state capture, we all found renewed hope at the start of the tenure of our current president. And when he issued the Tumamina call, I've always been one who have said, instead of standing on the side complaining, roll up your sleeve and see what you can do to help. And I think that's what triggered that particular decision. But it was always in line with my life orientation, which is to try and be a blessing and have positive impact.
What kept you going? You said it hasn't been easy, and our political environment is not one conducive to tax morality, to say the least. So what kept you going?
The one thing that does renew one's hope and gives one the capacity to keep going is I try and look past the politics of the day. I try and look past the brokenness of our system and see the face of a granny who without our work would be destitute. I see the face of a little boy or girl who is able to go to a decent school without the risk of falling into a pit between toilet and losing their life. Just the fact that government could issue a meager grant of 350 Rand for people. When we sit down and we think it is our work that makes that possible, that's what gets you through your own emotional turmoil, ultimately.
Talk to us a little about your own leadership style, leadership philosophy, if I can put it that way.
There can be no other purpose for leadership than to serve. And I think a lot of us fake leadership because we are in the positions that we are because it's lucrative, it's rewarding for our ego, and we shouldn't deny we all have an ego and we like that ego to be massaged and stroked. And the rewards for leadership is great. But you have to be able to step away from that and think of leadership as really a call to stewardship. And that we are just passing through. So I've always modeled my work in that matter. But I think for me, it is ultimately about the impact we have on the only people we are accountable to, and it's not shareholders. the only people we are accountable to are the people we purport to be serving. And that would be our customers. In my case, you are all my customers, taxpayers, and I'm serious about that. Secondly, to understand that to serve our taxpayers or our customers well, we must take care of our people. And if we do those two things well, everything else will fall into place.
Let's move to the new normal. Your journey at SARS must have so many nuggets for a leader traversing not only rebuilding the reputation of an organization that was decimated from a brand perspective and a credibility perspective, but on top of that, we know we've just lived through a 102-year pandemic that has changed the way that we do everything. So talk to me about this new normal and how your leadership style has changed from pre-COVID to post-COVID.
I recently wrote a letter to our staff where I basically owned up and said to them we didn't know what we were doing. Okay? We were making it up as we went along. But the letter starts by saying to them, we did amazingly well. In 2020, 5 days before our financial year end, we went into a lockdown. We had to, now for those of you who understand SARS, in that last week, we still have about 100 billion to collect. On the last day, last year, we collected about 70 billion rand on the last day. So the amount of preparation that goes into ensuring we reach the revenue that the minister sets for us is intense. It's down to the management of a single taxpayer case. And all of those little bit adds up to ultimately when we announce 1.653 trillion. So we had to go through that entire last week of the most important week of our year without anyone at work. Except Johnston, the Chief Revenue Officer, myself, and a few other people who supported us. And we delivered a positive revenue result. The first 100 days we had to create, because we had no one at work, right? And only 14% of our staff were enabled to work remotely. So we had to step that up to 90%. We built 35 new online applications so that taxpayers could fulfill their basic obligations without coming to an office. And in the rest of the time, we built up to 45 applications. We didn't miss a heartbeat. We kept the revenue collection going. The decline in revenue was a reflection of what happened in the economy. We could easily declare victory and say, wow, even through that period, we were able to fulfill our mandate, ensure that government had the revenue to do more than what they needed to do. And so the message to the staff was to say, we all did well, but we didn't do well. Because in that entire period, we imposed on you. We asked you to turn your dining rooms into SARS offices. We disrupted your family life, your social life. And while we were doing that, you yourselves were anxious because you didn't know what was going to happen, whether you would get COVID. And so while you were going through your own not knowing, your own anxiety, we expected you to still perform your work. And we enabled you to do the work, but not always mindful of the imposition that we were making. And then when life changed, we said, now you must all come back to work. And people were finding reasons why we shouldn't bring them back to work. And so I said, and it wasn't as if we had a blueprint. So I have to come to you now and own up and say thank you for helping us. Thank you for being tolerant and patient with us. Now let's work together to heal and to find out what the new normal would look like. We created a work group with our trade unions, with our own internal staff, and we are in the final throes of redesigning our entire value proposition with our employees, which will include a new normal in terms of hybrid work. And I think what we all have to do as leaders is, with humility, accept that we made it up.
That's the first time that I have heard employees being put at the center of what we've traversed and asking for forgiveness for imposing on their lives. And I think that's a great lesson around the table. I certainly haven't heard many CEOs coming forward with that message to their staff. And the important thing here is that, Commissioner, I think everybody around this table is devising a new way of work. We're all sitting in boardrooms and saying, what does this look like? We are leaving here with your views on leadership in the new normal, and you are ultimately going to put together your statement that will live in a digital publication, in a physical publication, and in television.
My impressions and what I'd like to leave everyone with is, and certainly our impression from an EOH perspective in particular, is that we talk about this notion of leadership and what leaders are supposed to do, as opposed to, now we've spoken about it, we understand the theory, and how do we ring true to that, and how do we make it come to life. I also want to talk about some of the from a framework perspective, how I look at leadership every day, and what are the things, the physical things that I need to do on a day-to-day basis in order to ring true to that. It means that I have to show up, but it means that I have to be enthusiastic for people every day. These things are hard, they're complex, people lose faith in the process, and I need to find that enthusiasm within myself, but be true and authentic to it in order to translate and pass that on to someone else. I have to be kind as part of that process, and kind doesn't mean soft and not holding people accountable. And I often think about kindness in the context of Ubuntu, which, the Commissioner spoke about the world being in a fractured place. And I think what actually has kept South Africa out of falling over altogether is the fact that there's a very big and strong sense of Ubuntu running in the country. And we've always lived by those principles that I am because of you, and so therefore I need this. So I think there are more people like that, and I think we really need to focus on that from a leadership perspective.
I think what I'd like to just dwell on a bit is just talk about the inherent contradictions which were evident in what you were telling us. The one contradiction is this ability to be what I describe as both hard and soft. So we've spoken about all the soft stuff, which I deeply believe in. It's about how you deal with people, how you deal with the world, giving an organization a sense of purpose. But the hard stuff is, going through COVID, companies run out of money. So you've got to look carefully at your cost structure, look carefully at your balance sheet. And we had to nurse a number of companies through real balance sheet stress at the time, and address cost structures around a sustainable thing. So a leader that's able to deal with the hard and the soft, I think, is very, very important. The other one, which you also alluded to, is this ability to be both optimistic, the good things, but a bit cynical too. And I'm sure in your world, you've got to be cynical at all you're seeing. And we're just finding more and more in the companies we're involved in, we're seeing bad stuff happening, with employees, with the ecosystem, with organized crime that's taken place. I'm personally a deeply glass half full person, but I think all of us have got to be realistic and also a little bit cynical sometimes in our work. But getting that balance between being optimistic, glass half full, cynical, glass half empty, I think is an important contradiction too.
Commissioner and everybody else who's contributed, thank you so much for your inputs. I paid particular attention to what you were saying, and I could palpably feel the value system that was inculcated in you and that you have taken along in all your work, but that you have most especially taken back to SARS, helping us as a country. Values is, it is for me absolutely everything. If we are grounded in values that are absolutely consistent and that keep us in a place where we can deal with the new challenges, the new opportunities that are thrown on us, by drawing from the lessons that we bring on the table, I think we will have far to go.
What we need to do is to return to some of the foundational values, not just from where we come from, but how we got to where we are as a country in terms of overcoming the challenges of the past, whether it's overcoming apartheid, whether it's overcoming anything else. And I'm so aligned with you on this idea of the what is the new normal. Because to me, you could talk about technology, you could talk about GBV, you could talk about any of the challenges that we face as a country. But I think the core problem is the breakdown in the value system of the country and of the people and how we got to where we are. So that's what I wanted to immediately build onto that. The problem with South Africa today is there are different standards for different people depending on your social status or your economic status. So we need to be exemplary as leaders. So it mustn't be do as I say, it must be do as I do. You need to enable citizens to be able to contribute, to be able to participate, to be able to pay.
Edward, I really enjoyed your whole presentation, and as everyone says, there was so much richness in there. Maybe for me, the one that stood out, which I built a lot of my leadership philosophy on, is around the people. So I always say, if you look after your people, they will look after your clients and your business. I think as leaders, let me talk about my specific industry, we need to shift a lot more to spending time on explaining the why. I think you need to explain to people why they should be in the office. And it's not necessarily the water cooler discussions. It's very different to the point that Darby made earlier, very individualistic for different groups. But you need to spend that time explaining to them why they need to be in the office, when they need to be in the office. It's not every day. And empower them to make those decisions for themselves. Because I think if you spend that time explaining the why, that's one of the key ingredients to winning the hearts and minds again of your people.
So I think one of the things that I'll pick up on, Commissioner, is that I think in moving forward, an area that we need to give serious consideration to is partnerships amongst organizations, things that we can do together. And one of the things that we have been involved with is the Digital Work Accelerator under the presidency, where they've reached out to a number of organizations for us to look at what we are doing in terms of digital skilling. And they have certain targets that they're working towards. And so all of our corporations are focused on ensuring that we can ensure that we are digitally skilling an X number of young people every year. And some of us are providing access to employment as well. But, so I think working together in partnerships is something that is very, very important. And obviously, I think as Emery said, continuously focusing on the people that we work with in our organizations is something that is critical. And that's what makes it all possible. Thank you.
I think just to, go back and my sort of things that I've learned over the last, 10 years or so is one is, especially in this new world, you need to lead from the center, not from the top. I think a lot of people have talked about it. You need to be an enabler, not a dictator, because you are only there, by the grace of your board or of the, people who want you there. You need to create the business that you would have liked to have taken over. So when you leave, be proud of the business that's there, not proud of how much money is in your pocket.
I've just written down what I think leadership should be despite COVID, despite the norm or whatever. But it should be centered around understanding that leadership is not only concerned about building an empire through conquest and self-serving, but leadership is an art of using wisdom to bring alive passion, alignment, innovation, peace, creativity, and a sense of belonging. When all these come alive, productivity, accountability, integrity becomes a given.
I think leadership today is even more about people than it ever was. Treating them as individuals, differentiating between them, which is different to the past where we wanted to treat everybody the same. I think that is, and that requires leadership and leadership training, 100% agree, into the future even more so.
Just for me, in terms of the journey at EOH, I think one of the things that has been our guiding light has been around values and principles. And if you're guided by your principles, you'll always come to the right answer. And it's also important that we create a space to listen. We should listen more than we speak, so that we can actually hear our people. I was just going to leave you with one last quote that kind of resonated and picks up, I think, on what everyone said today. It's from Martin Luther King, and it says, "We need leaders not in love with money, but in love with justice, not in love with publicity, but in love with humanity."
For me, as leadership is, we have to ask ourselves, how relevant are we to our people? So what do we stand for? What is our set of values? What do we expect from our employees? What do they buy into? Because they appoint you as well. You don't just only appoint them. Secondly, are we keeping up with the times to stay relevant for our customers? How do we take their hands and build partnerships and walk the road with them through these kind of disasters that we've experienced?
As leaders, we need to accept that things are no longer where they were, and instead of trying to fight for what was, right, take the brave step, right? I'll go so far as to say, you know, in your leadership, don't be lazy. It's a hard environment. It's a different environment, right? You need to tackle that new normal and actually go about, you know, in the new normal. And I think the last one was about, you know, being exemplary. I think that's the point that you made right now. If you're saying we're going in this direction, then let's go in that direction. Let's not go in this direction because it's convenient for you today, right? If you're going to be a leader, then lead properly.
The big conversation is, I belong here. How do I get our people to feel I belong here? I offered the learn, earn, serve, but what I've heard since then is a recipe I'm going to walk away with today, and I want to share that with you. I want to collaborate, I want to perform, I want to grow. It has to be individual to me, Davi. It could involve education, Putti. It must be relevant, Tebe and Barry. I must be accountable for it, Sitembele. I must leave a legacy, and so it must be lasting after me. I'm a custodian, Stephen and Davi again. Sustainable, Barry. It must be from the center, Stephen, from the heart, Fatima, and it's internal and external. Don't let's forget the internal and external health, which was Anthony's contribution. And so I'm walking away with a whole toolkit I didn't have before the time. Thank you, Bronwyn, and thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, all of you.
I want to share with you what I call 3 timeless values. Firstly, I think leadership orientation, more than ever before, is about stewardship. It is about understanding that we have to bequeath something greater than we inherited. Leave this world or our community or our place of being in a better place than what we found it. And only steward mindsets will create that. The second timeless value for me is what gets measured gets done. But there's an upside and a downside to it. Because if you measure the wrong things get done. And I find in so many organizations we are not clear about what it is we want or need to measure. And so I would ask leaders, think carefully about what winning means. Think carefully about how we frame what we want to measure. The third timeless value is people don't show up for us. Get rid of that egotistical idea that people show up for us. They show up for themselves. Everyone wants to have meaning in their life. Everyone wants to win. And everyone wants to belong to something greater than themselves. And all we have to do as leaders is to create that environment, or as they say, create the field, and they will come. Contrary to our ego need, our people do not expect us to be perfect. They expect us to be real. They expect us to be authentic, and that includes showing your own vulnerabilities and being prepared to, even if it is necessary, weep with your employees if that's how you need to show up in that moment.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. We understand that time is everything today. Absolute privilege to have you all with us. Commissioner, you've inspired us. Let's go out there, back to work, to your agendas, and thank you so much to contributing to Leadership Legacy, the new normal. You are now part of a journey where we're going to create that tangible handbook going into the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.